Hello, everyone. My name is Sophie. Good evening, and thank you for tuning in. We here at Books and Books, an independently owned bookstore in Miami, Florida, are so delighted to welcome you to a virtual evening with Cyndie Spiegel and Jennifer Pastiloff to discuss the new book, Microjoys, published by our friends at Penguin Life. A bit about our guest, Cyndie Spiegel is a born storyteller turned writer. She's an aspirational voice and an igniter of powerful conversation around self-acceptance, integrity, and joy. She's a former fashion executive, adjunct professor at Parsons School of Design and Fashion Institute of Technology, and holds a master's of professional studies. She's also a TEDx speaker and a certified yoga and meditation teacher. She has been featured in publications such as Forbes, Glamour, Teen Vogue, and the Huffington Post. She is the founder of Dear Grown Ass Women, an inclusive and highly relatable social community for women 35 plus, and she is also the author of A Year of Positive Thinking. Moderating tonight's event, Jen Pastiloff is an author, public speaker, poet, writing coach, the creator of the Shame Loss movement, and self-proclaimed real weirdo. Cheryl Strayed, author of Wild, calls Pastiloff a convent of awakenings, and Kiesa Liman calls her a heart magician. She was on the cover of Yoga Journal magazine with Elizabeth Gilbert for the creativity issue and has been featured on Good Morning America, as well as in People magazine, Shape magazine, and others for her distinct style of teaching, which she has taught to thousands of people in sold-out workshops all over the world, as well as virtually in her Allow Writing Workshop series. Just a quick reminder that throughout this evening's broadcast, you can post any questions you have below in the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen. We will be answering them at the end. Please order your copy of Microjoys from Books and Books and support independent bookstores. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hello. Hi, Jen.
Hello, Cyndie Spiegel. I think I'm going to jump right on into the microjoy, and a great microjoy, which I'm going to ask you to define for the uninitiated, was this morning when we FaceTimed, and I was like, I'm going to paraphrase myself because we don't have a lot of time. I was just like, I'm tired. Do we have to do dinner? And we kind of let each other off the hook. And I thought about ease and friendship, being able to be flexible. And then I thought about you and how we're new friends. I mean, we're old new friends. But when I came to your in-person event on Sunday, you saved me a seat on the side. And I didn't think twice about it. Now, for people watching this, I'm deaf, I read lips. And after the next day, Cyndie texted me, oh my God, I'm a shitty new friend. I can't believe I put you on the side. And she was kind of spiraling. And I didn't think twice about it, but I was so moved that you thought about it and you kept thinking about it. And I was like, no. And that touched me more than anything. And I think about these, how easy it is to find microjoys, to allow ourselves to be delighted by instances like this, where, and I know you felt bad about it, but it actually touched me so much that you thought so much about my well-being. And then how easy it was to be like, let's just do dinner next time I come to town. And to me, that's like a microjoy showing up in a relationship. So
That's beautiful.
You.
Thank you for saying that.
Why don't you explain to folks what a microjoy is?
I will. So a microjoy, it sounds like, look at us with our books. So it sounds like it's a small moment of joy, but really what it is an easily accessible moment of joy that can be experienced despite our current circumstances.
So say that word again,
despite our current circumstances. Yeah.
Right.
So regardless of what we have going on around us, we can still access these moments of joy. So we are grieving, we can still access joy. We are going through difficult times in our lives, we can still access joy. So this is really about having the capacity and awareness.
Why do you think that's so hard? I mean, I think Cyndie and I fell in love. I'll tell the toilet story. I couldn't hear on FaceTime if it's a do or don't. But I do a lot of my work on the toilet. I was on the toilet, going through a divorce, about to be.
I'm sorry, y'all.
Leaving for Italy. And my friend Jonathan Fields, check his podcast out and his book, The Good Life Project. And oh my God, why can't I think of his book? Sparked. He was
Sparked.
like, basically, he put an ask in to ask me to blurb this book. The last thing I had time for. And of course, I find myself being called, and I was like, yes, give her my number. And we talk on the phone for like an hour. I have something called beauty hunting. Now, friends, I did not invent beauty hunting. I only bought the URL smartly. But when I got the galley from Microjoys, which I brought to Italy, I was leading a retreat. I was like, oh, this is what it is. We have the same, we're calling it a different thing. It's the same thing. We're just calling it a different thing, but it's the ability to find beauty or joy or delight, even in the shit, even in the pain. And why is it that we forget that so often? That we think things are so binary.
So I think our culture is one that requires that we do one thing or the other. We are not comfortable in the gray, but the majority of life happens in the gray, right? We want to feel one thing and one thing only. We want to experience one thing and one thing only. But truthfully, what happens is we end up suppressing everything else. So this idea of Microjoys, and Sunday was my book launch event. It was the first on the tour in New York City, which is where Jennifer was.
It was beautiful, friend.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. But, there was this conversation that just kept coming up, and we'll talk a little bit about how I got to writing this book, but particularly around how we don't think we deserve these moments of respite and moments of joy, especially when we are going through difficult things, right? Like when we are grieving, we don't feel like we deserve to feel moments of joy. We don't feel like we deserve that respite. And so I think as a culture, that's just not a conversation we're used to having, which is holding multiple things at once.
Well, so now I think I need to share the story that I was sharing at lunch today. My son is 6 going on like 100, I mean, trust me, he's a 6-year-old, but he's also so wise. And I'm going through a divorce, and he's doing so well right now. And I have a home and an apartment. And so he's staying put. So he wasn't quite aware what's going on. And he kept saying like, why can't mommy and daddy be together at the same time? And finally I looked at him and I said, Charlie, sometimes mommies and daddies do better like this, but we're best friends. And he looks at me, Cyndie, I don't know if I told you this. He goes, I couldn't believe he said this. This was just a month ago. He goes, but mommy, you can't be two things at once. And I'm like, oh, wow, he's 6. And what he meant was divorce and also friends. And I said, oh, honey, and not parentifying him, but I explained to him about I said, grief and joy. I said, Charlie, do you know what grief is? And I told him about my dad, having, being in deep grief and having a moment of joy. And so he got that we can be going through a divorce or divorce and friends. And it was like this light bulb went up. And I thought, oh, at 6 years old, he's got this understanding that most of us, well, our age, I don't know, maybe unconsciously, but wasn't given permission. Permission, right? So your book is a permission slip. It's a reminder to people that life isn't just one way or the other. It never is anyway.
No, it isn't. But again, I think it's something that in our culture we believe to be true. I think, especially in a post-2016 world, so many things are incredibly divisive. The conversations we have, the communications we have. And we've really sort of, over these past few years, really sort of dug in our heels and said there's only one way to be in the world. And if you don't believe the same thing that I believe, then you're wrong. And the way that I think that relates is because it's this real binary of thinking, right? There's only one right way. And that has sort of carried us to the point we're in today in 2023, where that crosses over everything. It's not just political. It's now everything that we do in the world. So we have to undo that. We have to undo that norm and say two seemingly different things can be true at one time, like experiencing joy and going through grief, or not believing in the same sides politically. Like two things can be true. We can still be friends. But I think culturally, that's not where we are right now.
Oh, and then ADD, friends, ADD, at me. That's why I'll jump around. But another reason, I think I knew right away when I find my people I know and I hold on, but I knew right away it was a humor. I was like, oh, I started reading a book. I'm like, oh, okay. Sense of humor. Because I think, my son's hilarious. He's my dead father incarnate. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care if he does shit else in life. Funny. My kid is funny. Your willingness to be with humor, and I think you're so screwed in life if you don't have a sense of humor. My favorite quality in a person's humor, and it's someone like you'd look at you and read your story and be like, oh my God, breast cancer, your nephew, all these things.
Actually,
right?
Jen, I should talk a little bit about how we got to the book before you get into that.
Oh, okay. Well, I was actually gonna segue into
Were
that.
you segueing in? Okay, segue away.
So I get the book, The Galley, and I open because let's just say what it is. You say that pretty much on the first page, second page.
Yeah.
So I'm on the second page and I'm like, there's all this stuff and then there's something kind of lighthearted or funny. And I was like, oh, my girl. So I knew immediately that this was going to open me up in a way, because I respond to humor. So I was going to ask you, how did this come about? Because in the second page or whatever it is where you say all these things, not that they didn't happen, but I don't like minimize them into things that occurred in your life that are on paper and are really terrible. And yet you wrote a book called Microjoys.
Yeah, so a lot of things, right? But in 2020, so in 2018, I wrote a book called The Year of Positive Thinking. I have always been an optimist. 2020 happened. We were all experiencing a global pandemic. We were quarantined at the time. May of 2020, the same week that George Floyd was killed, my 32-year-old nephew was murdered walking to a friend's house. Within 4 months of my nephew's death, my beloved mama passed away unexpectedly. Within a month of her passing, my 48-year-old brother had a stroke and then went into cardiac arrest, where he spent the next 2.5 months in the ICU in the middle of a pandemic. So the only people left in my family were my brother, who just lost his son and his mother, and me. And we would call up to the ICU 3 times a day, every day for 10 weeks because he couldn't have visitors. Crazy. By the grace of God, he made it home. And within a month of him making it home, after being in the ICU for 10 weeks, mind you, you're not supposed to be in the ICU for more than a week or two. But after he made it home, within a month of that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And all of this happened in a 10-month span of time during a pandemic. It is. And, there's a word for it. It's compound loss and compound grief. And what I came to understand was that this is not uncommon. Your story's not going to be mine.
Well, I know. I was going to go, there's a word for it. Life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is life, but truly, as somebody who wrote a book called The Year of Positive Thinking, as somebody who studied positive psychology, when the shit hit the fan and I was as far down as I've ever been emotionally, I could not positive think my way out of it. I didn't want to think about things positively. I didn't want to look for a silver lining. Now, mind you, I've always been an optimist, but in that moment, I started writing on Instagram about microjoys, which were essentially these moments of light that existed even while I was grieving,
Had you already
was sad.
Had you already sort of coined that, or did it
no,
you were like, wait a minute, and then it just came as you were doing an Instagram post?
Yeah, I wasn't doing my Instagram post with 2 fingers. I was probably doing this, but I like your 2-finger movement.
I'm a Jew from.
So am I. You don't use your fingers like that. So anyway, as I was doing this, the word microjoy came out. And it ended up sticking because other people started to send me their microjoys, because though folks weren't going through what I was, we were all in a pandemic. We were all grieving something. And then folks would start to DM me and say, this was my microjoy today. You don't have to respond, but I just wanted to share it with you. And, I think it sounds like it's a small thing, but oftentimes it's not. And The first time I
Well, it
remember
could be,
this,
I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? It could be anything. It could be small. It could be huge. That's not the point, right?
it's not the point. And the way that I remember it initially coming to me was after my nephew passed away. We were going through a photo album from his childhood. Actually, I'll show you my nephew. That's when he was in
Hold on.
kindergarten.
God damn it. I don't want to cry, but
I know.
oh God.
That's my nephew.
And-
I know. But I remember going through a photo album because, you're having a service for a 32-year-old and going through a photo album and seeing all of these pictures from his childhood, including this one, and being able to laugh through the tears. Like it instantly transported me back to this moment, standing next to him, while I was in high school and he was going to kindergarten. That is a micro joy, right? It's the ability to hold joy in one hand and grief in the other at the exact same time. And that's what my family experienced. It wasn't going to bring him back. He was already gone, but it allowed us a moment of respite from our deep grief.
I'm so grateful for this book, and I know it's not on purpose that it's more micro than a lot of books, like size-wise.
Like it's actually small and cute. Yes.
It is, but I carried it around, I've been carrying it around. Like today I went, I was in Soho, which is like, I live in I live in California, and I have my book and I'm like walking around with it, but it's like I was saying about my son, like giving him this lesson.
Yeah.
And let me rephrase it. Living that way. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not giving it to him. It's modeling that this young. It's not so much like, yes, unconsciously I saw that. I saw life isn't just one way. My dad dropped dead when I was 8. But teaching him that, living that way is everything. In this book, gosh, I just want everyone to read it because you can go. People so often, I work with so many people who are grieving or have lost children, and people want to turn away. And I'm always like, let's just bear witness. We don't need to fix.
Yeah,
We need to
that's
say
right.
anything.
That's right.
Bear witness. And
that's right.
Often I do these retreats with all these women who've lost kids, and people are like, oh God, they must be miserable. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
They're the most fun ones. It's like, because they're wailing, but the most, because it's not just one thing or the other. And for some, as this cultural way that we live our lives, we are not it seems like we have amnesia. We forget this constantly. So with this book, and also the book is so accessible because of the way you wrote it. And I know here tonight, I haven't read it yet, or maybe you have, but it can be read at random. Like you can open up, read any chapter. You don't have to read it. And believe Cyndi's not, yes, you do. But you can just open it and read. No. But that's it makes it so accessible, just like a microjoy,
Yeah.
You just can pick it up and be like, oh, I needed that. Like the thing about the freckles.
Yeah.
I peed at that. It was so like,
You peed your pants?
And your storytelling ability, your ability to take these moments in life that could be the most profound loss or something random, or where, as you say, nothing happened, or something silly, and turn it into something where you go, huh?
Yeah.
Would you look, as my friend Stephanie Mon said, ain't that some shit?
Ain't that some shit? Yeah. But we have those moments all the time, except we allow them to pass us by. We're too busy going to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that we're not noticing these moments. That's exactly right, Jen. It's like we are not allowing them to be present for us. They're happening. Like Microjoys, every essay in this book, it was happening regardless of whether I tried for it or not, because they are life. I just had to notice that.
That's the thing. But difference is Cyndie isn't, or I aren't better than anyone else. But I will say, please, I can't even, like, I didn't take a shower today. I mean, but
what?
Because I'm telling how shitty I am at most things in life. But what I'm good at is staying open. Being open to microjoys, to beauty hunting, to delight, to connection. So often, and I don't know if you get this, often people go, Jen, it's so crazy. These experiences you have are, what a coincidence. And I go, by design, baby, by design.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We're not special.
we all have the Leonards. The
Yes.
story in the book, there's a beautiful chapter. Everybody has a Leonard, but how many
Yeah.
people stop and talk
Yeah.
with them? And
Yeah.
right?
I think the foundation of this entire book is about presence and being conscious enough to see what is around us in any particular moment. Right? Like all of these things that happen when folks are like, "God, how does that happen to you? That only happens to you. How does this always happen?" It's like, no, no, no. It happens to all of us. We are just
Totally.
not paying attention. And I hope my sort of dream with this book is that we walk through the world a hell of a lot more present than we have been,
I
particularly
was going
today.
to ask that. I was going to ask, what's your,
Yeah.
you know, your wish, you know, and you could give the
Yeah.
like, I want to be on the New York Times bestseller. I do. Or,
Yeah.
and then also, but yeah, that.
Yeah, I think we need to reconsider what joy means. You know, I talk a lot about
Ooh,
the
that's
difference
good.
between
That's good.
joy and happiness, right? Happiness is fleeting, it is temporary, it is something that is triggered by external things, right? We go buy that thing and we feel happy, we get a dopamine hit, and then the happiness fades away. We are
Yep.
in this
Yep.
culture that has
Yep.
told us to chase that. And
Absolutely.
happiness is not a permanent state of being.
And who,
Joy,
like,
on the other hand, is joy is that thing that emanates from the inside out. You don't need to buy things to experience joy. And that's
I
what
mean,
this
I
book
do.
is about.
So,
You can buy things, but you don't have to.
one of my favorite people, Rabbi Steve Leader,
Yes.
who, I mean, I'm a Jew, but I'm a bad Jew. I met him and I just kind of fell in love with him. And it was around New Year's. And he said, I never say Happy New Year. He said, I always have a meaningful New Year. And I was like, God, I love that.
Mm,
Because I like happiness is it, that word, it even
so
feels, it reminds me
fleeting.
nice. It's like, what does it mean?
Yeah. Yes.
What
Yes.
does it mean? Right. So
Yes.
joy. And I love how you said that, like redefining joy. And I think about
Yeah.
delight. It's like I love Ross Gay, the Book of Delights. Like
Mm,
being able to redefine, like, well, what brings me joy? I mean,
yeah.
in fact, that's what I was trying to explain, probably not succinctly, but when you made, a deal out about not putting me in the front and this and that, that
Mhm.
actually brought me great delight because it's
Mm,
like I was like, gosh, she so cares about me. And like,
mm,
but and so I know it was painful and you were like, I'm a shitty friend, but it brought me
yeah.
such delight, if this makes
Yeah.
sense. That I was so delighted that I had this friend that was like
Yeah.
thoughtful.
Yeah, no, and I do understand that. And again, right, Jen, we can hold two things at once. So for me, it was a matter of thinking about like, well, Jen's in town from LA and she made a point to come to my book event. And I have a rule because I'm a former professor. I have a rule that if anybody comes in late, you sit in the front with me, right? Just to make everybody uncomfortable, including myself. But you weren't there when I talked about that rule. And so the next day, actually,
But
it
that was
woke me
buying
up that
pants.
well, you were buying pleather pants, which looked amazing. So I'm not mad at that purchase. But at 4 o'clock in the 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and thought, oh my God, Jen is deaf. And I had her sitting on the side where she can't see anything coming out of my mouth. And I was so upset for
That's
what I
crazy
had
because I
done.
left early and I was like this. Thank God she had me on the side. It was so much easier. And it took me, so it's like it's all about perspective. I was like,
It
yes,
really
but it
is.
was
Well, when
awkward.
I messaged you and you were like, "Oh, it's fine." And I was like, "No, it's not fine. It's not fine."
And I was
But
like,
yeah,
this
that's
is the Jew in
delight.
you. And the Jew
Yeah.
in me, is like today at
Yeah, yeah,
lunch,
yeah,
I'm
we
like,
worry.
to my friend, you're not what you don't like your food? He's like, you've barely taken a bite. I'm like, yeah, that's the Jew mom in me to be like,
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
going
yeah.
on? Why aren't you eating that?
Correct. So we
Um,
both have Jewish mamas. My dad is African American Black, and my mom was Jewish. They both passed away, but Jen and I both have Jewish mothers, and there's a lot of essays in the book about my Jewish mama and
I
her ability
I
to
love your
give
Jewish
me
mama.
grief.
Never got a
I do
chance to
too.
meet her, but
Here's my
I love
mom.
that she would
There's my
send you the
mama.
weather. Hold on, I gotta say
Yeah,
this. Can you tell them about that? That she would just like send you the weather report?
yeah. So there's my
So
mama.
one of my favorite lines is in "The Only Living Boy in New York" by Simon and Garfunkel, and a song is
Mm.
the only news you need is the weather report. And I thought of that immediately when you told the thing about your mom.
So my
And it's,
my mom, again, I should just say I am a 45-year-old married woman. My husband is a great guy. Like we are adult people who have done something with our lives in the world. Mama Shelley did not care. every single day. Now, mind you, she was only 30 miles away. We were in Brooklyn. She was in New Jersey. She would text the weather every morning and tell us how to dress.
That's
We are
my
in
mom.
our 40s. But, you know, I talk about this in the book. I said, you know, I would give her such grief about that. We were constantly bickering. I think in many ways we were best friends, but we were also constantly bickering. And I would give her such grief. And I would say, Mom, I don't need you to send me the weather. It is the exact same weather that I have on my phone. And so then what she started to do was to text my husband the weather instead, as if like, fine, you won't let me send you the weather. But I also talked about, and this is the Microjoys part and the holding two things. You know, here we are 2 years out from my mom's passing. And I said, I wish I could pick up my phone and have a message from her telling me about the weather, you know?
Yeah. And
Both things.
and that's so stuck in my head now that I was like, today I was like, what's the weather? I was like, if only Cyndie's mom was still here, I could ask her, you know?
Correct. She'd tell you to bring an umbrella and she'd be wrong, but she'd do it anyway.
And there's a time, so I don't know where we are. Like, if people have questions, or they're just like, "No, these two idiots, let's let them keep talking."
No, we can go for a few more minutes. I think if anybody has questions, they should put them in.
Oh, okay. My glasses on, so you know.
Yeah, no, they can put them in. We'll keep talking for a little bit, but there is a question that is here, and it says, "Why do people suppress or ignore microjoys?" I think that it's not that we're suppressing joy. I think we don't always necessarily know that we can feel multiple things at once. So other emotions get suppressed. So for example, if we are grieving, nothing in most of us tells us that we can also feel moments of joy. So any moment of joy or happiness, you know, even in the midst of the most difficult things, there's beauty that exists, right? There are plants, there's nature, there's children, there's adults that love you. There is, you know, your favorite
you looking
wine.
like Cyndi Lauper.
There's that. There's all kinds of things, right? But it's the binary that we live in that says we can only feel one of them. And the one that we often feel is the one that is most acceptable by society, which is not usually joy in the midst of grieving. So I hope that answered the question. So it's not so much a suppression of joy. And I think the ignoring piece of it is more so we walk through the world very unconscious, you know, all the time. And in many ways we have to do that, right? Because the world is coming at us. We can't, you know, be hyper present in every single moment. We'd never get anywhere. But there is this sense of how do we reconnect with that? And that's what Microjoys is about. It's like, how do we notice what's happening around us, even in the midst of life as it is?
So I love the hashtag Microjoys. I love it. I'm just gonna get it all the time. And but your husband at your book thing had on this great pink sweater. And it was for me, you know, and it brought me and your tattoo, either way, it brought me great delight and joy. And can you unrelated, but just because, you know, I'm nosy, but how do you guys meet?
So my husband and I, his name is Ira, we met on the internet. But what's interesting, Jen,
his name is Ira.
His name is Ira. Yeah, but he's not Jewish.
I mean, it's such a it's like the most Jewish name.
But he's not Jewish.
I know.
Isn't that ridiculous?
I know.
Well, so do you know this? We met on the internet, but we didn't tell my mom that. A Jewish mom is in most cases not going to be okay with you meeting a stranger on the internet. My mom would not have been okay with it, but our wedding came out in the New York Times the day that we got married. So my mom found out we met on the internet at our wedding. And at that point it was too late, so it was fine, you know.
Yeah, well,
we met on the internet.
Yeah, it's funny because I'll be like, how do you meet on the internet? People are like, it's an anomaly if you don't not meet on the internet.
I know. Where else do people meet? Where else do people meet?
That we're on the internet right now.
There's a question here. Oh, go ahead.
No. I think I was just like filling space with nothingness.
So it says, it seems like gratitude has a lot to do with this topic. Is this something that you touch on in the book? Yes. So a microjoy could be gratitude, but not only gratitude is a microjoy, if that makes sense. So much in the book, as much as I said earlier, you know, when I was going through the hardest things, I couldn't positive think my way out of it. So much of this book is still based on positive
But it's
psychology. It's
positive
based
thinking.
on,
It's because I love that Cyndie and I are doing this together, because I'm like, my gosh, I
so
apologize in
here's the
advance for my
first book I
stutter.
wrote.
But my
Here's
buckle
the first.
clenched a little with the word positive. I don't use
Yeah.
negative, and I was like, is it a
Yeah. You know,
what?
I think what's happened, I think the reason your butthole clenches is because we now, first of all, positive psychology is research and science. This is not something that some people just made up, right? Martin Seligman, like you can look up his
I
work,
guess
but
I think of it as positive. What do you call it?
toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those two things have
Bypassing.
become conflated, right? This idea that, you know, we should find a silver lining in everything. It's what I call this toxic positivity movement, the good vibes only culture. And
Ugh.
there is no such thing as good vibes only, right? There is no such thing. So that saying kind of does something to me, because that is sort of the essence of all of this. When we live in a culture that tells us that everything should be good vibes only, it doesn't leave room for us to feel
Yeah.
things that aren't, you know, perceived as positive.
Yeah.
So positive thinking is based on positive psychology. It is not based on what the internet has taken and sort of run with and made us feel like it's the only thing that we should feel.
Well, I mean, I love that you clarified it, and I did know that. I was kind of asking tongue in cheek, because my own people will be like, Jen, you're so positive. I'm like literally no. You're the optimist. I mean, waiting for the other shoe to drop over here, but I think they mistake. I ultimately think it is the same thing. I just don't call it that, but it's being
Yeah.
able to find meaning or find beauty
Yeah.
despite breast cancer and
Yeah.
my nephew and all these things where
Yeah.
we think we should be one way, right?
Yeah.
I'm not grieving properly, or how can this be possible that I'm laughing when I'm like having the deepest pain I've ever experienced in my life, or whatever it may be, right?
Mm-hmm. I think positive thinking, so much of it is really about hope. Do
Oh, I
you
love
have hope? You
I
know,
love
and again, like even with Microjoys, it's finding hope when life is not okay, not finding happiness when life is not okay.
And it sort of feels like, oh, who are you? How audacious of you to like,
Right.
who are you to have hope? But we all, even in like, the most. I'm reading a book. It's coming out next week. This beautiful man and his wife lost their two teenage children. It's called Finding the Words, and it's like, I'm sure people are terrified to pick it up, right? Because
Yeah.
the way we are so often is like, I can't even listen because then it might happen to
Yeah.
me.
La 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 la. Yes.
And it's like, how dare they like be able to find joy after it's mind blowing, right?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're talking about.
That is exactly what it is. It's really, again, like my hope is that this becomes permission for folks to feel joy. It doesn't mean that you don't have to sit in your sadness, right? It means that both things can be true. You know, I talk about how I remember kind of in the midst of that 10-month period of time coming into my office and bawling on the floor, but I had to get out of bed because I didn't want to wake my husband up. Right. And so I came into my office and I bawled on the floor. It's like those moments had to happen too. Microjoys is not about ignoring those
Bypassing.
moments.
You did not bypass.
No, I had to sit in it. And I think in many ways, sitting in the difficult emotions allows us to feel these sort of perceived positive emotions even more, because we know the contrast of it. You know, we're not walking through the world numb. We are feeling everything as it is. And that is really what so much of the essence of this book is about, is like, how do you feel all of it? You know, how do you have these moments of respite, even in the midst of life as it is?
I'm here for it. You know, today at lunch I was talking about, I mean, ad nauseum, I quote just Mary Oliver, all of them, but one specific poem, When Death Comes, in the last line, she says, I don't want to simply end up having visited this world. And this is that. This is that same sentiment. That's what it is. It's like, nope, not just a visitor. I'm fully alive. I'm here for it.
Yes, that's it. All of it, right? We're here, we're alive, we're here for it. But that means we have to allow ourselves to be here for all of it, because it's very easy to numb out, right? To just feel the things that we want to feel. And this book is really saying, nope, that's not it. Feel all of it. Allow yourself to be with all of it so that you can feel the extraordinary too.
I also love, I forgot about this part, the very, very beginning, or not even the beginning, like I forget what you call that when you write something. Gosh, you'd think I know, like where you say
the preface, the introduction preface.
Hold on. You say, these are my stories and memories. It's not even a preface. It's, what do you call that?
Yeah, it's just a note in the front. It's just a note. It's just a note right here.
Just a note.
I don't know if there's a word for it. I don't know.
But so I have, having lost my dad when I was 8, all I have are memories. And I was famous among my friends for having a steel trap memory. And as I've gotten older, I can't remember anything. I mean, I thought your name was Susan until like 5 minutes before we started. It was
Shut up. No, you didn't.
But Susan Spiegel. But I love the
That is my therapist's name, for the record.
It is?
It is. Not Spiegel, but Susan. I thank her in the back of the book.
Cyndie Spiegel's therapist, Susan, Siri. So
I know.
The permission you gave to say
from one finger. You weirdo.
These may not be, because it's not the point. It's not about the exact names. It's not the point. And I thought that's another sense of permission. It's not about getting everything exactly right.
Yeah.
It's the feeling, right? And I found that to be really, like, I noticed I exhaled. I was like, oh.
So what the part that you're talking about, it just says, these are my stories and memories. And while I have tried to be as accurate as possible, I also acknowledge that these stories and memories may differ slightly from others, because that is what memory is, right? Like we all have a different version of it. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that. And this book is memoir. It's 45 essays that are my lived experiences. And I should just acknowledge that I didn't use anyone's real name in the book. And that was very consciously, because when writing memoir, the story is not just your own, right? There's the way that I perceive what happened. And then there's the other person's or the other folks, version of that same story. So it was important to me to kind of acknowledge up front that, look, this is how I moved through that. It may not be true for you.
I think, that a memory is fascinating. And if you've ever seen the show, you haven't, I know you haven't, but it's called The Affair.
How do you know I haven't?
Because you told me a bunch of times now, I'm the worst with like shows and names and
pop culture. Yeah.
Well, it's called The Affair. And
never saw it.
Basically it was split into two. And the first was like the guy's perspective and the woman's, and there would just be like slight different things, but it's like the thing he said, she said, and then what happened.
Yeah.
My sister,
yes.
I'm like, that's not what happened. I'm like, we were both there. Oh, she's revising history, and she's thinking the same about me, but we were both there.
Yes, but you remember it differently.
Yes.
And our memory is fascinating in that way, because when we have these memories, no one can tell us that they are not true. We will not believe you.
So
we will go to the grave, yes, knowing that this is the truth. But that too, it's like there isn't generally one truth, right? There's the way you remember it and the way that I do. Neither of them is necessarily.
I'm usually right, but
yes, well, of course, no, I knew that. No, but memory is fascinating in that way.
I want everyone to buy it. I want to buy it. Them to buy it with friends. And what is great again about the size of it, and I really realized that carrying it around, is it's just like, it's easy to carry around. It's cute. It's easy.
So we want folks to buy it, Jen, but we want them to buy it here at Books and Books, because this is a small bookstore. We want them to go to the blue link and buy it right here specifically.
Yeah. Why? Because supporting independent booksellers is everything. And if we want bookstores to be around,
that's right.
They're a dying breed. We got to support them. It's imperative. It's a non-negotiable. Go out of your way. It's a pain in the ass because you don't get it. Like you order it like
yesterday.
Midnight, doesn't come the next morning from Amazon. Oh, wow.
No, I think that many of us know it, but we still want to choose the easier route. But truly, if you were here, if you were interested in Microjoys, it's very easy to buy the book right here. There's a link at the bottom,
buy it there.
Which matches your jacket, by the way.
I did it because of that.
Yeah, the green button, the green button.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sophie, do we have questions or what are we thinking? We're here for you all while we're here. Okay, sorry for all the questions. Lucas says, I'm really interested. Could you elaborate on positive
any of that
psychology? I feel that therapy now. Okay. Honestly, I don't have an opinion. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so I will not. I'm not one to speak to what therapy is rooted in. I can only speak to my own personal experience with my therapist. But positive psychology is a body of work. And if that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend that you look up Martin Seligman's work. Martin Seligman, Seligman. Many people will refer to him as the father of positive psychology, because positive psychology was only really discovered in our lifetime, in the past 30 years or so. So if that's something of interest to you, and I highly recommend it, look up Martin Seligman's work.
Oh, I love that.
Sorry, Sophie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're perfectly fine. I think those are all the questions that we have for tonight. I really want to thank you guys for doing this. It was such a nice conversation. I had a really nice time watching it. Again, guys, please buy Microjoys from the Green. From Books and Books. And I just wanted to let you know, Cyndie, that this event will be available for replay, so make sure to share.
Beautiful.
And
excellent.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jen. I love you.
I love you. Mwah.